"Please do remove my clothes," the Apache girl pleaded, but the cowboy did, and it broke him. Life here was hard. The settlers worked long hours, hunted what they could, and relied on one another for safety. Among them rode a cowboy, a man who had spent most of his life on horseback, chasing cattle and surviving in a world that demanded toughness. He had a weathered face, a deep-set look in his eyes, and hands that were strong from years of labor. Despite his outward strength, there was a part of him that longed for something he could not name, a sense of belonging, or perhaps understanding. The cowboy had been traveling alone for weeks, moving from one town to the next, earning what he could and living off the land. He had heard stories from other settlers about a mysterious Apache girl who lived near the borders of the settlement. Some spoke of her as someone fierce and proud. Others whispered that she had a gentle heart hidden beneath her strong exterior. Curiosity and a strange pull drew him toward the outskirts of the land where she was said to live. He did not know why he felt compelled to find her, but a part of him hoped for a connection that had always eluded him in his lonely life. Riding slowly along the dusty path, the cowboy observed the landscape around him. The plains stretched endlessly, dotted with shrubs and the occasional tree. Birds called to one another, and the distant mountains seemed to watch over the land. He felt a mixture of excitement and caution as he approached the area where the Apache girl was rumored to be. He was aware of the delicate balance between the settlers and the Apache people, and he knew he must tread carefully. One wrong move could ignite tension or cause harm. As he moved closer, he noticed subtle signs of life. A fire burning gently near a small grove of trees, smoke curling up into the sky. He dismounted quietly, tethering his horse to a nearby post. His heart beat a little faster, not from fear but from anticipation. He wondered what kind of person she might be. Would she be wary of him? Brave? Gentle? The stories had painted a picture, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of meeting someone so unique. The first time he saw her, she was standing near the edge of the trees, her figure strong and poised. Her hair was long, dark, and caught the light of the setting sun, giving it a reddish glow. Her eyes, sharp and clear, held a mixture of curiosity and caution. She looked at him carefully, sizing him up, and in that moment he understood that she was not someone who could be easily intimidated. She was aware of the world's dangers, but she carried herself with dignity and strength. "Hello," he said softly, trying not to startle her. His voice was rough from travel, but it carried a note of respect. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she observed him closely, studying his expression and body language. There was a long pause, filled only by the sounds of the wind and the occasional rustle of leaves. Finally, she spoke in broken English, her voice calm but cautious. "Why are you here?" She had likely encountered many outsiders who did not respect her or her people. He felt a pang of guilt, realizing how careful he must be to show genuine respect. "I'm not like the others," he said quietly. I want to understand." She seemed to sense that he was telling the truth, but trust was something earned, not given freely. "Then you must be patient," she replied. "Trust is not given lightly. Not here. Not with me." He had always been a man of action, quick to respond and solve problems, but here he was faced with something different, someone whose trust could not be taken for granted, whose spirit could not be tamed. It was both frightening and compelling. They spent the next hours observing each other from a distance, communicating in small gestures and careful words. He watched her tend to a small garden, her movements deliberate and graceful. She noticed him watching, but she did not seem afraid. Instead, she maintained a quiet dignity, showing that she was strong in her own way. The cowboy felt a mixture of admiration and humility. He had never met anyone like her, someone who could stand so firmly in the world while remaining gentle and kind. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of red and purple, the cowboy knew he needed to make a decision. He could leave, retreating to the safety of his own world, or he could try to bridge the gap between them, even if it meant risking rejection or misunderstanding. His heart urged him forward. He stepped a little closer, speaking softly again. I don't want to frighten you. I only want to know you. You must show it every day with your actions." Night began to fall and the first stars appeared in the sky. The cowboy made camp a short distance away, careful not to intrude. He lit a small fire, its light flickering across the ground, and thought about the girl he had met. He realized that he had been searching for something all his life: companionship, understanding, a connection, and he had found a glimpse of it in her. But he also understood the responsibility that came with that connection. Trust could not be demanded, and respect could not be assumed. As he sat by the fire, the cowboy reflected on the day. He thought about the girl's courage, her wisdom, and the quiet strength she carried in a world that often sought to diminish such qualities. He knew that meeting her was only the beginning. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of tension, but there was also the potential for growth, for learning, and for a connection that went beyond words. Sleep came slowly that night, the sounds of the frontier surrounding him. He dreamed not of cattle or the open plains, but of the girl and the quiet dignity she embodied. He felt a strange mix of fear and hope. He feared making a mistake that could never be undone, but he hoped for the chance to show that he could be trustworthy, that he could respect the life and spirit of another person. By morning, the cowboy rose with a renewed sense of purpose. He approached the edge of the grove where the girl had been, hoping to see her again. She appeared, standing tall and watchful, her expression unreadable. He nodded to her, a silent acknowledgement of the beginning of their fragile understanding. She nodded back, a hint of cautious approval in her eyes. It was not trust yet, but it was a start. And for the cowboy, that was enough to continue, to take the first careful steps toward a bond that would test him, challenge him, and perhaps, in time, change him forever. The day stretched ahead, filled with possibilities and uncertainties. The cowboy and the Apache girl were two lives intersecting in a vast, untamed land, each carrying their own fears, hopes, and past experiences. Their journey together had just begun, and though the road ahead would be difficult, it promised lessons about respect, understanding, and the courage to face one's own shortcomings. As the sun rose higher, the cowboy felt a quiet determination. He would tread carefully, honor the boundaries she set, and learn from the moments they shared. The frontier was harsh, and the world could be cruel, but in that quiet corner of the land, a fragile connection had begun. One that neither of them fully understood yet, but one that held the promise of profound change for both their lives. The next few days passed quietly on the edge of the frontier. The cowboy continued to observe the Apache girl from a distance, careful not to intrude on her space. He watched as she moved with purpose, gathering water from a nearby stream, tending to a small garden, and caring for a few animals she had nurtured. Each action revealed her strength, independence, and intelligence. He could see that she understood the land in ways he never had. She could read the sky, the wind, and even the behavior of the animals as easily as one might read a book. It was impressive, and it humbled him. Despite the distance, a subtle connection began to grow between them. They exchanged small gestures of communication, nodding, sharing water, or leaving small gifts like berries or herbs. Words were limited, but their actions carried meaning. The cowboy learned to respect her boundaries, approaching only when she allowed it and stepping back when she signaled discomfort. Slowly, trust began to build, fragile but noticeable. One afternoon, a disturbance in the settlement drew the cowboy away. A group of bandits had been spotted nearby, and the settlers were uneasy. Knowing he could not ignore danger, he saddled his horse and rode toward the commotion, hoping to prevent any harm. The Apache girl noticed his departure and watched him go, her eyes filled with concern. Though they had only begun to understand one another, she sensed that he carried both courage and a sense of responsibility. The cowboy reached the outskirts of the settlement just in time to see the bandits attempting to raid a small store. He acted quickly, positioning himself between the thieves and the settlers. With careful movements and the authority of experience, he managed to chase the bandits off, ensuring no one was hurt. The settlers were grateful, offering thanks and respect, but the cowboy's thoughts were elsewhere. He thought of the Apache girl, wondering what she would think of his actions. Would she see him as someone worthy of trust, or merely another man who acted without thought? As he returned toward the grove, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the land. The Apache girl had moved closer, watching from the edge of the trees. When he finally approached, she did not speak at first. Instead, she studied him with an intensity that made him feel both nervous and accountable. "You helped them," she said finally, her voice calm but filled with curiosity. "But did you think about them or only about yourself?" Her question struck him deeply. He had acted out of instinct, yes, but perhaps also out of ego. "I wanted to protect them," he said honestly. "I wanted to do the right thing." Protection is understanding the risks, the consequences, and the feelings of those involved. Do you understand that? He had admired her strength before, but now he understood that her insight went beyond simple survival. It was a deep understanding of human nature, caution, and respect. That evening, as they sat near the fire he had built, they began to speak more openly, though carefully. Words were chosen slowly, weighed against the trust that was still fragile. The cowboy learned about her life, the challenges she faced growing up on the frontier, the lessons she had learned from her family and community, and the ways in which she had learned to protect herself and others. He listened with rapt attention, realizing that every word carried meaning, every experience shaped her into the person she was. She, in turn, asked him about his life. He spoke of long days on horseback, of loneliness and hardships, and the moments that had tested his courage and character. He did not speak of all his mistakes, not yet, but he began to understand that honesty was a path toward trust. Slowly, a bond formed, delicate yet tangible, built on shared understanding and careful respect. But life on the frontier was never simple. One day, as the cowboy and the Apache girl were tending to small tasks near the stream, a misunderstanding arose. A misunderstanding that could have been avoided, but which escalated due to fear, pride, and the unpredictability of human nature. Perhaps the cowboy, attempting to help her with a heavy bundle of supplies, misread her reaction. Perhaps he acted too quickly, driven by his instinct to assist without considering how she felt. "Please, don't remove my clothes," she pleaded, her voice trembling but calm in its urgency. Her words were not filled with anger but with fear and the need for boundaries to be respected. She stepped back, trying to create distance, her eyes wide with concern. The cowboy froze, struck by the gravity of her words. He realized immediately that he had misjudged the situation. In his desire to help, he had crossed a line, one that could never be ignored. The realization hit him like a cold wind. He wanted to apologize, to make things right, but words seemed insufficient. He could see the fear in her eyes and the tension in her posture. He understood that he had broken a moment of trust, and it pained him more than anything he had experienced on the frontier. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The cowboy stepped back, giving her space, and the Apache girl retreated to the edge of the trees, her expression guarded. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken emotion, regret, and the weight of consequences. He knew that he had to reflect, to understand what he had done, and to find a way to regain her trust if that was even possible. That night, he camped alone, the fire casting flickering shadows across the land. He thought about his actions repeatedly, examining every choice and movement that had led to this moment. He felt a deep ache in his chest, a mixture of guilt, sorrow, and determination. He realized that strength was not only in action or courage, it was also in restraint, understanding, and respect. The Apache girl had shown him the depth of this truth, and he knew he had to change if he wanted to honor her and the fragile connection they had begun to build. Meanwhile, the Apache girl returned to her people, seeking comfort and counsel from those she trusted. She shared her experience carefully, teaching others about caution, the importance of boundaries, and the resilience required to face the unpredictable world of the frontier. She was not broken by the incident, but she was reminded of the importance of vigilance and self-respect. Her dignity remained intact, and her wisdom grew stronger with every challenge she faced. In the days that followed, the cowboy attempted to make amends in small, careful ways. He respected her distance, observing quietly and offering help only when it was clearly wanted. He learned the delicate balance of showing care without imposing himself, of demonstrating respect through action rather than words. Slowly, he began to rebuild what had been fractured, though he understood that some wounds required time and patience to heal. He also reflected on his own life, considering the lessons of humility, empathy, and the consequences of impulsive behavior. The frontier had taught him survival, courage, and endurance, but it had never taught him the subtle art of understanding another person's heart and boundaries. The Apache girl, through her strength and wisdom, had opened a door to a deeper understanding of human connection, one that demanded thoughtfulness, respect, and patience. As the sun rose over the plains, painting the sky with hues of gold and pink, the cowboy felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that earning her trust would be a slow process, one that required constant mindfulness and humility. Yet he was willing to take that journey, not out of obligation, but because he had glimpsed the value of genuine connection, and he understood that it could not be forced, only earned. The Apache girl, too, observed him from afar, cautious but aware of his efforts. She saw the changes in his actions, the patience he exhibited, and the respect he now showed. While trust was still fragile, there were signs of progress. She acknowledged quietly within herself that his intentions were sincere, though past mistakes could not be ignored. The days turned into weeks, and the cowboy and the Apache girl continued their careful dance of interaction, each learning from the other. He learned patience, empathy, and the importance of listening. She learned to recognize sincerity and to see the effort behind actions. Together, they navigated the complexities of human connection in a harsh and unpredictable world, discovering that even mistakes, when faced with reflection and humility, could become lessons that shaped the future. By the end of the second part of their story, the cowboy had come to understand the true meaning of respect and trust. The incident that had broken a moment between them had also broken something within him, a realization of his own fallibility and the importance of careful, considered action. The Apache girl remained strong, wise, and vigilant, a symbol of resilience and dignity in a world that often demanded compromise of character. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, both were changed. The cowboy had learned humility and the consequences of his actions, and the Apache girl had reinforced her strength and understanding of human nature. Their journey, filled with challenges and lessons, had only just begun, and the future promised more tests of character, trust, and the delicate balance between respect and connection. After the incident, the cowboy found himself wandering the plains alone more often than not. The vastness of the frontier, which once brought him a sense of freedom, now felt heavy with regret. Every rustle of the grass, every whisper of the wind reminded him of the Apache girl's voice, her words, and the plea that had shaken him to his core. He remembered her calm but firm eyes, the way she had stepped back and held her dignity despite the fear she must have felt. That image haunted him. He knew he had made a mistake, a grave mistake, and it weighed on him more heavily than any hardship he had faced on the trail. Out here, a man could survive storms, hunger, and danger, but the moral weight of his actions pressed upon him in a way nothing else could. He rode slowly, often staring at the horizon, thinking of ways to make amends, though he understood that some things could never be undone. His thoughts were filled with self-reproach, and for the first time he questioned the man he had become. Meanwhile, the Apache girl had returned to her people. The incident had left her cautious but not broken. She shared her experience in careful, measured words with those she trusted, seeking guidance and support. Her people understood the dangers of the frontier and the unpredictable nature of those who traveled through it. They reminded her of her strength, encouraged her resilience, and offered wisdom that helped her regain a sense of safety. While her trust in the cowboy had been shaken, she had not lost faith in her own judgment or in the possibility of seeing the good in others. As the days passed, the cowboy continued to reflect. He realized that survival in the wilderness was not enough. Moral survival, the survival of one's own conscience, was equally vital. He recalled his past decisions, the times he had acted without thought or consideration, and how easily those actions had consequences beyond what he had imagined. The incident with the Apache girl became a mirror, forcing him to confront the parts of himself he had ignored or suppressed. One evening, he found a quiet spot near the edge of a stream. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the water. He dismounted and let his horse drink, taking a moment to breathe and consider what he had learned. He remembered the girl's words: "Protection is understanding the risks, the consequences, and the feelings of those involved." Those words echoed in his mind, becoming a guidepost for how he wished to move forward. The cowboy began to take action in small, meaningful ways. He helped settlers with their daily tasks, not out of ego or desire for recognition, but because he genuinely wanted to make a positive difference. He offered guidance to younger men, teaching them lessons he had learned the hard way. He worked to mend relationships strained by his previous impulsiveness and sought to live with greater care, thoughtfulness, and respect. Despite his efforts, he could not escape the memory of the Apache girl. He often thought about her resilience, her intelligence, and the quiet authority she carried. He wondered if he could ever regain her trust or if their connection had been irrevocably altered. Each day brought a mix of hope and fear, a longing to demonstrate that he had changed, and a fear that it might never be enough. Meanwhile, the Apache girl observed him from a distance, aware of his presence but cautious about engagement. She noticed subtle changes in his behavior, how he acted with patience, how he listened carefully, and how he approached others with respect. Though she remained wary, she began to see glimpses of sincerity, moments that suggested he was striving to become a better man. Her trust was not yet restored, but she recognized the effort, and that acknowledgement marked a subtle shift in their dynamic. One day, a new challenge arose. A wildfire threatened part of the settlement and nearby lands, spreading quickly across the dry plains. Smoke curled into the sky and flames licked at the edges of the grasslands. The settlers panicked, unsure of how to contain the fire or protect their homes. The cowboy, driven by both instinct and a desire to act responsibly, rode toward the danger, signaling for people to move to safety. He coordinated efforts, helping to dig fire breaks, move animals, and guide those at risk to secure areas. The Apache girl, watching from a distance, was impressed by his calmness and leadership. Despite her caution, she saw that he was acting not out of pride but out of genuine concern for the safety of others. She recognized that he was applying the lessons she had shown him through his own reflection: patience, careful thought, and respect for the well-being of others. Though still hesitant, she felt a measure of hope that perhaps change was possible. After the fire was contained, the cowboy returned to the outskirts of the land, exhausted but relieved. He dismounted and sat quietly, reflecting on the day's events. The sense of accomplishment was tinged with humility. He had acted, yes, but with consideration and care, not recklessness. He realized that true courage was not only in confronting danger, but in understanding the impact of one's actions and taking responsibility for the outcomes. As night fell, the Apache girl approached cautiously, her expression unreadable. She did not speak immediately, but her presence alone suggested that she had recognized his efforts. Slowly, she nodded in acknowledgement, a gesture that carried a great deal of meaning. The cowboy understood that trust was a delicate thing, one built through consistent action rather than words alone. This small gesture was a reminder that change, though slow, was possible. Over the following weeks, their interactions remained careful and measured. The cowboy continued to show patience and respect, allowing the Apache girl to set the pace of their communication. He learned to observe her cues, to listen more than he spoke, and to act in ways that honored her boundaries and autonomy. Every small gesture, offering food, helping with tasks when asked, or simply giving her space, was a step toward rebuilding trust. The Apache girl, for her part, began to recognize the sincerity of his efforts. She noticed that he no longer acted impulsively, that he thought before he moved, and that he respected the limits she had set. While her trust was still guarded, she began to allow brief moments of interaction, small conversations, and shared tasks that brought them closer in a slow but meaningful way. Through these experiences, the cowboy learned an important lesson, that redemption was not about grand gestures or dramatic acts, but about consistent, humble action over time. He understood that some mistakes could never be fully undone, but the effort to make amends and to act responsibly could create a path forward. The Apache girl, too, found a renewed sense of agency. She remained vigilant, but she also began to see that people could change, that actions mattered more than words, and that she had the power to guide how others engaged with her. Her strength and wisdom were not diminished by the past incident. They were reinforced, allowing her to navigate the complex social dynamics of the frontier with confidence. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a brilliant orange, the cowboy and the Apache girl found themselves near the stream where they had first begun to communicate. Neither spoke immediately, but there was a quiet understanding between them. The cowboy had learned patience, humility, and the importance of respecting boundaries. The Apache girl had observed, assessed, and acknowledged his efforts in her own way. Though trust was not fully restored, a fragile connection had been rekindled, a connection based on observation, respect, and careful action. As the night deepened and the stars appeared, both reflected on the lessons learned. The cowboy understood the weight of his past actions and the responsibility he now carried. The Apache girl recognized the possibility of change and the value of cautious engagement. Together, they moved forward, not yet fully healed but with the potential for growth, understanding, and a bond that could be strengthened over time. By the end of this part of their story, the cowboy had transformed in subtle but significant ways. He was no longer the impulsive man who had acted without consideration. He was thoughtful, patient, and deeply aware of the consequences of his actions. The Apache girl remained steadfast, wise, and resilient, embodying the strength and dignity that had first captured his respect. Their journey, though far from over, had entered a new chapter, one marked by reflection, learning, and the slow rebuilding of trust. The frontier remained unpredictable, filled with danger, challenges, and moments of uncertainty. Yet, amid the vast plains and endless skies, two lives had intersected in a way that would shape them forever. The cowboy had been broken by his mistake, but he was learning to rebuild himself through humility and care. The Apache girl had been cautious but unbroken, guiding him in her own quiet way, teaching lessons that would remain with him for the rest of his life. As they parted that night, each went their separate way, carrying with them the experiences, lessons, and reflections that had defined this chapter. The cowboy rode under the starry sky, determined to continue his journey with greater awareness and integrity. The Apache girl returned to her home, confident in her strength and mindful of the wisdom she had imparted. Their paths were intertwined now, not fully reconciled, but forever changed by the events that had brought them together. Time moved slowly on the frontier, each day blending into the next under the wide sky and endless plains. The cowboy continued his solitary journey, but now there was a difference in the way he rode. His movements were deliberate, his actions thoughtful, and his eyes held a quiet reflection that had not been there before. The incident with the Apache girl had left an indelible mark on his heart and mind, reshaping the way he saw himself and the world around him. He had learned that strength alone was not enough to navigate life. Understanding, respect, and patience were just as vital, if not more so. The Apache girl, too, continued her life with the wisdom she had always carried. She remained vigilant, aware of the dangers of the frontier and careful with her trust. Yet she also recognized the changes in the cowboy, even from a distance. She saw that he acted with caution and humility, that he approached people with respect, and that he had begun to demonstrate the lessons she had tried to teach him. Though her trust was not yet fully restored, she allowed herself to notice these small changes, quietly acknowledging the effort behind his actions. One day, a threat arose that forced them both into the same place once again. A group of settlers had been stranded after a storm, their supplies ruined and their livestock scattered. They were in danger, vulnerable to both the harsh elements and the unpredictable wildlife of the frontier. The cowboy, seeing the situation, knew he could not ignore it. He rode quickly to offer assistance, aware that every decision he made now carried weight. He approached with caution, making sure his actions would not startle or threaten anyone, especially the Apache girl, who had arrived shortly after to ensure the safety of those involved. The two worked together, though carefully, coordinating efforts to gather supplies, lead animals to safer ground, and provide shelter for the settlers. Their cooperation was quiet but effective. They did not speak much, allowing actions to communicate their intentions. The cowboy had learned to respect her space and her leadership, recognizing that her knowledge of the land and her instincts were invaluable. The Apache girl observed him closely, noting how he had changed since their first encounter. He was no longer impulsive, no longer acting without thought. He moved with awareness and consideration, showing the lessons he had learned through his reflection and remorse. As the day progressed, they found brief moments to speak, carefully and respectfully. The Apache girl shared advice on navigating the terrain and handling the unpredictable elements of the frontier. The cowboy listened attentively, asking questions when necessary but never assuming he knew more than she did. Each interaction was a step toward rebuilding the fragile trust that had been damaged long ago. Slowly, the gap between them began to close, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, thoughtful action. By evening, the settlers were safe, their immediate dangers managed, and the land calm once again. The cowboy and the Apache girl stood side by side, watching the sun dip below the horizon. There was a quiet satisfaction in their work, a shared understanding that they had faced a challenge together and emerged stronger for it. For the cowboy, this was a moment of reflection, proof that he could act with care, humility, and integrity. For the Apache girl, it was a reminder that people could change, that sincerity could be recognized, and that her wisdom could guide others toward better choices. That night, as they sat near the campfire, the cowboy spoke softly. "I have made many mistakes," he said, his voice low but honest. "But I have tried to learn from them. I want to be better, not just for myself but for those I care about and for those who depend on me. You have shown that you can act with care. That is how trust grows slowly over time. It cannot be demanded and it cannot be rushed." And she, in her quiet strength, was teaching him the value of patience, the power of observation, and the importance of respecting boundaries. Over the following months, their lives intertwined more naturally. The cowboy became a regular presence near her settlement, always careful not to intrude, always aware of her comfort and autonomy. He helped when he was asked, guided others in ways that were subtle yet meaningful, and continued to learn from the wisdom she offered, both directly and indirectly. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and moments that strengthened the fragile bond between them. The Apache girl, for her part, began to allow him closer, though still cautiously. She observed his consistency, his patience, and his respect for her space. Gradually, she allowed conversations to linger longer, shared stories of her life and experiences, and accepted his presence as a companion in the larger work of surviving and thriving on the frontier. She had not forgotten the past, but she recognized that people could grow and change when they faced their own shortcomings with honesty. One afternoon, they encountered a family struggling to rebuild after a flood had swept through part of the settlement. The cowboy and the Apache girl worked together to provide assistance, coordinating with others to ensure safety and stability. Their teamwork was seamless, built on mutual respect, understanding, and a shared desire to protect and support those in need. Through these experiences, the cowboy continued to learn humility, compassion, and the quiet power of consistent, thoughtful action. As seasons changed, the frontier brought both challenges and moments of beauty. Winters were harsh, with snow covering the plains and wind cutting through even the sturdiest clothing. Summers were long and hot, with endless days of sun and occasional storms that tested the resilience of both people and land. Through it all, the cowboy and the Apache girl faced the hardships together, learning to navigate not only the environment but also the delicate dynamics of trust, respect, and human connection. The cowboy began to feel a sense of purpose he had never known. He had learned that true strength was not measured by the ability to survive alone, but by the ability to act with consideration, integrity, and empathy. He reflected on the incident that had changed him so profoundly, recognizing that it had been a turning point in his life. The mistake he had made could never be erased, but it had given him the opportunity to grow, to understand the consequences of his actions, and to strive to become a better person. The Apache girl, too, reflected on the journey they had shared. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the challenge of maintaining her dignity in a world that often demanded compromise. Yet she had remained strong, wise, and resilient, guiding the cowboy and others with quiet authority. Her ability to forgive, carefully, thoughtfully, and on her own terms, demonstrated the strength of her character and the depth of her understanding. Eventually, their relationship evolved into a bond built on mutual respect and trust. They were no longer merely cautious observers of one another. They had become partners in navigating the challenges of the frontier, supporting and learning from each other in meaningful ways. Their connection was not defined by grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but by consistent, thoughtful action and the recognition of each other's worth. One evening, as the sun set and the plains were bathed in golden light, the cowboy and the Apache girl stood together, watching the horizon. There was a quiet peace between them, a sense that they had both grown through their experiences and had learned valuable lessons about respect, trust, and the power of human connection. The cowboy had been broken by his past mistakes, but he had rebuilt himself with humility and care. The Apache girl had remained steadfast, guiding him with her wisdom and strength. In that moment, the cowboy understood the true meaning of redemption. It was not about erasing the past or seeking forgiveness for its own sake. Redemption was about acknowledging one's mistakes, learning from them, and striving to live in a way that honored the lives and dignity of others. He realized that the journey would continue, that challenges would arise, and that the frontier would always test both courage and character. But he felt ready to face those challenges, armed with the lessons he had learned and the guidance of someone who had taught him more than he could have imagined. The Apache girl, too, recognized that change was possible, that people could grow and learn, and that trust could be rebuilt through consistent, thoughtful action. She remained cautious, wise, and vigilant, but she also allowed herself to see the sincerity in the cowboy's efforts and the possibility of a meaningful connection that could endure the trials of the frontier. As night fell and stars dotted the sky, the cowboy and the Apache girl sat by a small fire, reflecting on the journey they had shared. They did not need words to communicate their understanding. Their actions, presence, and shared experiences spoke volumes. In the quiet of the frontier, they found a bond that was rare and precious, a bond built on respect, humility, and the willingness to learn from one another. By the end of this chapter, both had changed profoundly. The cowboy had transformed from a man of impulsive action to a man of thoughtfulness, humility, and genuine care. The Apache girl had reinforced her strength, wisdom, and resilience, demonstrating the power of patience, observation, and guidance. Together, they had faced challenges, learned from mistakes, and built a connection that was meaningful, enduring, and full of potential for the future. The frontier, vast and unpredictable, continued to test them, but they faced it with courage, awareness, and respect. Their journey was a testament to the power of human growth, the importance of understanding and empathy, and the enduring value of trust earned through consistent action. In the end, the cowboy and the Apache girl were both changed forever, carrying with them the lessons, experiences, and wisdom that would guide them for the rest of their lives.